Bunnicula, the graphic novel, was released in 2022. It's based on the famous 1979 book by Deborah and James Howe. Andrew Donkin adapted the text. It's illustrated by Stephen Gilpin, although James Howe gets a special credit for the cover illustration. I thought it was an okay graphic novel. The illustrations are fine, but I think they could have been better. Something overly dark and serious would have fit the story well. Instead, the artist's strengths are with visual gags and the animal characters. That definitely suits the story since it's funny and animal centered. The human characters looked a little off to me, mostly just Toby, who has the same shaped head as Chester the cat. I saw two other reviewers say Chester's face is weirdly human at times. I would agree. It doesn't ruin the book or anything like that, but it did stick out in places. It almost feels silly to write a summary of the story since it's very much the same as the original. It's like Donkin was told to change as little of the original text as possible, which is a good decision because the original text is great. The book has been popular for 40 years. There's little room for improvement. The general story is that a family called the Monroes finds an abandoned rabbit in a movie theater. The movie was Dracula, so they call him Bunny Dracula, or Bunnicula. Our narrator is Harold the Shaggy Dog. His friend Chester has a very active imagination. Chester quickly decides Bunnicula is a real vampire. Chester is dead serious about this, which is what makes the book so funny. A vampire rabbit is a silly idea, but it's made even sillier by Chester's insistence that they are all in grave danger. It's a rabbit! Chester plays off well against Harold, who is far more serious and believes Chester is making things up. Harold is funny in his own right, as he talks with great enthusiasm about eating food and taking naps. There are also a handful of jokes about Harold's lack of intelligence, but I can't fault him for not knowing what a parrot is. It's definitely more important to know what a cupcake is before knowing what a parrot is. Chester is more convinced that Bunnicula is a vampire when Bunnicula sleeps all day. At night, Bunnicula breaks out of his cage and into the fridge, which should be impossible. He's just a tiny rabbit. Maybe he really is a vampire? The next morning, the Monroes find a white tomato. Chester insists that Bunnicula sunk his fangs into the tomato and sucked out all the juice, the same way a vampire sucks blood. The text says there are fang marks in the tomato, but the illustrations do not show these marks. I think that was a poor choice. They should have had a close-up on the fang marks. More white vegetables are found when Bunnicula escapes his cage, unseen. This is why I suggested the illustrations could have been darker and edgier. The book does have a scary edge to it in certain places. I will never be able to look at a white zucchini without thinking of this book in terror. Harold's narration, though often humorous, is a bit old-fashioned and serious, making the story feel like it was a vampire story written in the 1800s. The Monroes are confused by the white vegetables. Chester tries telling them Bunnicula's a vampire. He dresses up like a vampire and bites Harold on the neck. The Monroes mistakenly think Chester is cold and wants a kitty sweater. No, Chester does not want a kitty sweater. No cat wants a kitty sweater. Ever. Next, Chester tries to stop Bunnicula's nighttime excursions by putting garlic all over the house. It's so smelly that Mrs. Monroe gives Chester a bath. Doesn't she know cats don't get baths? Next, Chester wants to stop the vampire rabbit by driving a stake through his heart. Chester uses stake the food, not stake the weapon. Talk about a mistake! The Monroes are confused to see their rabbit lying under a stake like it's a blanket. Over the next few days, Chester is on his best behavior, while Harold befriends Bunnicula. The little rabbit is actually kinda cute for an animal that can't talk. Bunnicula seems tired and listless. Harold realizes that's because Chester sneaks in every night and uses garlic to stop Bunnicula from eating. He's starving Bunnicula! The next day, Harold helps Bunnicula by taking the rabbit to a bowl of salad. Chester appears and tries to stop Bunnicula from eating. Chester makes a huge mess. The Monroes are so concerned, they take all their pets to the vet. All's well that ends well, as Bunnicula is put on an all-liquid diet. He no longer leaves his cage to drain vegetables. Chester starts seeing a psychiatrist, and he learns to get in touch with his emotions through constant screaming. I've seen many preschoolers do the same thing. Best of all, the vet gives Harold a doggy treat instead of a shot. That's the end of the story. It's a great book that I loved as a kid, and I still enjoy it as an adult. I don't like the graphic novel as much as I like the book, but they are so similar, I can't dislike the graphic novel. It's a surprisingly fun and funny story about a dramatic cat and a lazy dog going up against a slightly scary vampire rabbit. That probably sounds like a weird premise, but it works amazingly well. This graphic novel does a great job of capturing the spirit of the original book. It makes me hope all the Bunnicula books will get the graphic novel treatment in the future. I give Bunnicula, the graphic novel, an 8 out of 10.